Hola chicos, bienvenidos. Mi nombre es Juani. I used to make this mistake in Spanish all the time. For example, in English, if I were to say, I have or I've got 5 months left until I go to New Zealand, I used to say, tengo 5 meses. I have 5 months hasta until voy a Nueva Zelanda, until I go to New Zealand. Now, over the past 5 or so years of me studying Spanish, I've learned that oftentimes, unfortunately, word for word translations from Spanish over to English often don't work. In short, tengo 5 meses hasta voy a Nueva Zelanda obviously is incorrect. What you would actually say in Spanish is me quedan 5 meses para ir a Nueva Zelanda. Me quedan 5 meses para ir a Nueva Zelanda. So, long story short, if you want to, in Spanish, express the English equivalent of saying a basic phrase like, I have or I've got 2 weeks left until my exams, or I have or I've got 3 weeks left until I go to Spain, or I have or I've got 5 months left until I move to Europe. In Spanish, we don't use the verb tener or haber, for that matter, to have in this particular context. In this context, grammatically in Spanish, it's set up completely different. Now, moving forward, in this video, we'll break this down for you step by step so that everything makes sense to you, so that the next time in Spanish, if you wanted to, for example, say, I have or I've got 3 months left until I go to Spain, you can say it with confidence. First of all, let's start by looking at that example that we just used before. If you wanted to say in Spanish, I have or I've got 3 months left until I go to Spain, in Spanish you'd say, me quedan 3 meses para ir a España. Me quedan 3 meses para ir a España. First of all, you would have seen and heard these verbs used quite a lot in Spanish, quedar and quedarse. Now, I'm not going to go into particular detail with these verbs because in Spanish they have multiple different meanings and would need a long time to kind of cover everything in regards to these particular verbs. But you'll notice we're saying at the start, me quedan. So we're using the plural form as you'll notice. Now, do you know why that is? Yep, the reason being we're saying 3 months or 3 meses. So we have to say me quedan in the plural form there, instead of saying me queda. Then to finish it off, para ir, to go, a España, to go to Spain. If it's not quite making sense just yet, don't worry, we'll go for another example. Next up, in English, if I wanted to say in Spanish, I have or I've got 2 weeks left until I visit my friends, I would say, me quedan 2 semanas para visitar a mis amigos. Me quedan 2 semanas para visitar a mis amigos. Again, if we break it down, we start with me quedan. Why is that? Because we're saying 2 weeks or 2 semanas, so we have to keep it plural. Me quedan 2 semanas para visitar, so to visit, a mis amigos. And you'll notice there we've got the personal a in Spanish, which we've referenced before, so para visitar a mis amigos. Great work. Moving on, I know what you're thinking, Hawani, what if we're using it in a singular form, or what if we're not using a verb at the end of the expression there? Which is a good question. So we'll go for a few more examples using those two types of scenarios. And please don't forget, if you are getting any value from these videos, I would really appreciate it if you'd consider hitting that like button. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing. Moving on to the next example, if you wanted to say in Spanish, I've got 1 week left until I get married, you'd say, me queda una semana para casarme. Me queda una semana para casarme. If we break it down, you'll notice here with this time, we're using it in the singular form. Me queda. Why is that? Because we're talking about 1 week here, which is obviously singular. So we'd just say, me queda una semana para casarme. So in this case, we're using the verb to get married, which is casarse. Now, one more question you're probably wondering, Hawani, what if I don't want to use a verb at the end of that expression? For example, if you wanted to say in Spanish, I've got 3 weeks left until my trip. So notice how I'm saying my trip at the end. I'm not using a verb. All you'd simply do is say, me quedan 3 semanas para mi viaje. So me quedan 3 semanas para mi viaje. So that's all you'd simply do if you're not using a verb at the end there. As always, great job everyone with that one. I hope that helps. Of course, if you do have any questions, feel free to write a comment in the comment section below. And apart from that, I will see you in the next one. Hasta pronto.